please go for the MTs.
Yeah. Derek, if you collapsed your lung before the NDT, you'd still be debating. Just saying.
Probably. It's one national tournament. I can't really miss any more ever.
Is it senior year?
No,
You have
we've
another
got.
year.
Well, yes, it is our senior year, but we've had another year. We're gonna use.
Oh, you gonna use the 5th year?
Yeah.
We will never leave. You have no lives. Put that out there.
Oh, you are in Central Oklahoma.
True.
Yeah, there's nothing else to do.
All we do is just cut cards and live in Oklahoma.
Get woken up by earthquakes every now and then.
Like that qualification.
Before we start. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
You're not gonna like this.
Anyone not ready? Good.
But what he sees is a process of refusal, one that reorients how research is oriented towards one of extraction, both ideological and how it manifests in the material forms. This refusal ruptures the static notion of indigeneity that allows indigenous women's bodies to be deemed rapeable and extractable for the use of settler society. This current representation around indigenous people and climate change debates are only framed through them as vulnerable or resilient, which allows for colonial interventions, which is why the external impact decay is not able to solve, because the myth of the vanishing Indian is continued by this form of research, and the alternative is only continues. The idea to vote negative to reject the one he sees is to reject reject the breaking down of how indigenous people are deemed static, which is inherently violent because it's just how settlerism justifies its violence. The example at the top of the 2AC of the Inuit hunting practices that are tied to land and culture being ended because settler government, because, well, you gotta have those trade routes. This logic is why questions of land sovereignty and genocide are tied together, and why their Woods evidence misses the mark on the question of why the alternative / pig would only reproduce settler society. Look, the ballot is simply framed as this. If you think the abs mode of refusal and the praxis of it is one that can be used to challenge settlerism and anti-blackness writ large, then you can vote affirmative, because anything else is complicit, and settlerism and anti-blackness, the top level filter for all their links is they're all based on recognition. Refusal rupture this because it doesn't require colonial recognition for the state, but instead refuses. This shifts the focus on how the state can, instead of how the state can help, but instead locates the analysis of how the state commits settler and anti-black violence. The Tuck and Yang evidence that has never been answered indicates that this is key to the ability for anything to be done to end this world, because research is what informs the people and academy writ large. The last line of it literally says about how the academy interdicts on indigenous and black life. Now, the good explanation of all their links, but the evidence is just, all their evidence is just about equivocation, not about the F, which means the trade-off is completely artificial. The voyeurism you can group all of refusal is able to solve. This is how violence is exported out of this space, and within this space. So it means refusal allows for a certain frame that ruptures the way the academy functions. We have the best internally. They don't have an explanation. The research argument about debate and voyeurism is when we don't have a robust explanation of refusal. Jazzy and I both done that work explaining how refusal is what collapses current forms of research over climate change and indigenous people. The impacts they extend to this are inevitable, because you will vote for someone which always has the risk of voyeurism and consumption. It's only a question of if refusal is able to resolve it. You can agree this debate is messed up, but the ballot doesn't resolve it. And what do they actually do? The pick doesn't make any sense. I'm going to answer the two link arguments. The body and flesh argument. They are all indigenous people are only granted their bodies insofar as they are deemed rapeable. This is what I explained at the top. The body argument is not a privilege. It's something that settler society and anti-blackness use to continue themselves, to continue the reproduction, because of the target of indigenous women, because of their potential for reproduction. discussion, the sovereignty link that is either generic and not about the affirmative, because our sovereignty is not just land focused, but also how land is internalized through the genocide antagonism that there Wood's evidence is indicative of, or they generalize sovereignty to everything, which reject every form of indigenous resistance, which implicates settlers. And now their PAKE argument doesn't make any sense. What are they picking out of? It probably proves that refusal is necessary. The permutation can combine both research methods to give the full account, not fall into the slippages of comparativity, which recreate settlers and anti-blackness. The PAKE proves that the mode of refusal is a good one, that they just disagree with I don't know more, but there's no warrant. The day evidence has a better frame and how they don't fall prey to the kind of sovereignty link of recognition that they are going through, because they refuse recognition by blowing up pipelines and proclaiming blockades. They haven't given a warrant why they should be rejected. Permutation, the momentary suspension of exceptionalist logic solves all of their offense with a giant net benefit. The 2R did not cover this part of the 1 ER, and Jesse spent enough time here. Anti-blackness is insufficient to account for settler genocide because they are historically distinct phenomena. The literature base grew in isolation of each other. Leroy is expanding on Tiffany King's dissertation to fix those analytical errors, which solves back any risk of the PAKE. If we win this mode of the settler safe state, we win the debate because it proves that their theory of violence is an accurate theory. Leroy proves all of our arguments, and then the King that they are co-constituent. King says that King to claim that black studies is inarticulate in the face of settler colonialism means the alternative is never able to solve. Framings of exceptionalism are historically false. Native slaveholding after the Civil War tried fought with the Confederacy, but afterwards were offered treaties that were contingent on establishing free slaves. If we win that their theories of violence ignores crucial slippages within settlers and anti-blackness, they cannot be explained by exceptionalism, which filters out any of their offense. We have 3 net benefits to the permutation: refusal, climate change, and red vanishing. The first 2 have already been explained above, but they can see the doubling argument, which proves why the praxis of refusal is one that should be affirmed. The alternative is literally using refusal as a method of how you can reject the evidence. Our methodological praxis is one that can be exported to explain things. Now, the Empire dissent. Their anti-dialectical approach to political ontology ignores the modern exploitation process of settlerism and slavery. This unique offense against the alternative is only something that the permutation can capture, because it requires suspending exceptionalism, which is something they can do. Permutation do both, and is able to explain that 20th century colonial formations depend on the structure of settlerism and slavery, depend on the traveling structures of empire to create forms of imperialism on population abroad. These aren't just historical FYIs. These are the slippages that their theory of violence recognizes via the exceptionalism, which was never other than the 2 our settler civil society is founded on exceptionalism. You voting for them reinscribes the empire. We are better to collapse debate. They don't have an alternative explanation to how they are able to do this. There's no trade-off between their analysis of Spence and the kind of crazy lady they talk about. The refusal is particular. That's our argument. Listen, remember, Leroy says the projects of slavery and colonialism have never been concerned with which came first, which is more elemental. They've thrived on slippages and ambiguities of the relationship to one another. Don't allow your ballot to continue these kind of slippages we've talked about. Otherwise, you risk continuing this world.
All right, this was a great round. Seriously, y'all did a great job. So this was very difficult. I ended up voting negative. So there are a few things here. All right. First is this Wolderson 14 piece of evidence, right? This kind of sentence argument, right? That like, violence against, certain bodies can be articulated within kind of a sentence of why it's occurring in the first place, right? However, kind of like anti-black violence is kind of like inarticulable, right? I think that this by itself, it's kind of like a threefold thing. I think one, this kind of gets to a little bit of the reason why your ballot framing, right, in the 2AR, that's along the lines of, listen, if you think that we can, solve for colonialism and a little bit of anti-blackness, right, if you think that that's the case, right, then you vote on the permutation, you vote for us, right? I think that given this Wilderson articulation, right, and given kind of a lack of contestation on this, right, I don't see how that solves it all, right? Like, now, that being said, that still necessitates a permutation, which is what I struggle with the most. I don't think that there is fantastic kind of debate going on this permutation on your end. However, I think that they kind of impact her in your methodology and your kind of like, epistemology in two different fashions. One is this question of research, right, versus discourse violence, right? So research, right, you're indicating creates, violence against indigenous populations, right? And they're saying that yes, okay, violence can be, first of all, I don't even think they consider that violence is ever, possible at the research level. However, there is a lot of violence that's attributed to kind of a discourse level that is completely kind of divorced from the research practices, right? And that you may be able to solve for the research practices. However, that discourse, right, that matriculation that he was getting to in cross-ex, right, is not something that you're able to give me kind of a walk to how the research practices, right, articulate themselves in the form of kind of things outside of research to begin with, right? He uses the example of like, the policeman's bullet, right, that is, no one's gonna write a think tank piece on that, right? However, that is like a real violence that's, felt by like a lot of people, right? And I don't think that the research focus, right, is the correct focus. I think that your focus on research, right, is one reason why the affirmative is a bad idea, right? I view it as a disad, okay? Second is this body versus flesh argument, right? And I think this kind of gets back to kind of what I was saying at the top about kind of like the sentence, right? So it's kind of, and it goes kind of a step further, right? Because it says that talking about things like body sovereignty, right? I mean, it's like kind of like the traditional like Wilderson argument based on humanism, right? That sovereignty has to, there has to be a human subject in order for sovereignty to exist in the first place, right? And perpetuating that logic, right, is kind of really, really, it's quite violent, right? And you all are perpetuating that logic by saying that like sovereignty exists, right, at the body level, right? And they're saying that no, like you can't have sovereignty at the body level because now that's propping up Western notions of humanism, right? So I view kind of the research versus the discourse and the body, flesh, sovereignty, humanism stuff as a separate disad. And I also view kind of their discourse as, breaking down discourse and refusal of discourse, right, as a reason why they probably get some type of access to the affirmative.
Some type of access, can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they win that there is violence, not just.
Sorry, I have to
Yeah, no worries. There's not just anti-blackness like manifests itself within discourse, right? But other forms of violence against like indigenous populations, against other populations that aren't black populations, right? There is violence that is created at the discourse level.
Yeah, that's our entire argument in the context of the way that indigenous peoples are framed within research discursively within climate change literature.
Right, so you're associating that discourse though at like the academic space, right? The research that takes place within like an institution, right? They're saying that there is discourse that is outside, right? That is more kind of not locational based, right? That is just kind of like more kind of, for lack of a better term, free flowing.
Okay. So in the context of the permutation, how did you view like all the exceptionalism stuff that we're going for?
Yeah, I don't think you solved that, right? I think this kind of
suspending exceptionalism? That's what the perm does.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm saying that I guess what I'm saying is that how you get to that point, right, of understanding how that like manifests itself, right, is incorrect. I think that they are they are turning your epistemology, right, in two fashions, right? How you understand, right, all of that like kind of violence, right, is premised on two incorrect assumptions according to them, right? And so you can refuse it, right? But if it's incorrect how it's like, you know, framed in the first place or understood in the first place, then I mean, I don't understand how the refusal solves.
The permutation, all the like
Yeah.
leeway stuff that we're going for,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
slippages.
The slippages and stuff like that, right? Like
Yeah.
I think the slippage argument like was a good framing for the permutation,
Yes.
right? However, two things existing on their own, right? That's one thing, right? However, if you are propping up epistemologies that recreate anti-blackness, right? That is a disset to the permutation, right? If your epistemology is propping up anti-blackness, which I think they've proven in two cases, right? Then